Right, so we are live. I am doing all of the video mixing and everything myself. So if I occasionally have to look away or fiddle with something, that is why, because I'm going to be cutting between obviously everything that's happening on the screen here and anything that I am talking about live. Also, because this is in theory a live Q&A, we're going to be answering some of your questions, we're going to be looking at examples, and hopefully we're going to be able to work our way through, find relevant examples of things that people are curious about. So I think the first thing to do is just get a little bit of a sense of everyone's level for this, because we can dip right into the fashion stuff, we can be looking at some of the more work-a-day kind of talking heads, corporates, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of different ways that we can approach lighting faces. But at the end of the day, it's always trying to get the best look for whatever the scenario is. So I guess when we're doing it, we're trying to either sell a certain product, a certain lifestyle, or we're just trying to make that person look well-informed and just good in general, I suppose. That's the real thing. When you're doing corporate communications, it's that approach. You're trying to make them look professional. You're trying to make them appear in the best possible light. That is what it's all about. So I think that generally that's all we're going to be looking at. But at any point, there are so many ways of approaching it. And I know when I was starting out, that was actually one of the big things, working out how you approach lighting. Because a lot of the time, if you are certainly starting out, you're either doing some commercial work, little bits of corporates, or you're just doing passion projects, you're thrust into situations where you don't necessarily get to choose who you're filming. You don't necessarily get to choose where you're filming them. You just have to get to the location that you're going to. If it's a paid gig, then it might be within an office space somewhere. And then you just look at it and you go, well, what can we do in this space? Do we have lighting with us? Do we have the ability to control anything? And then beyond that, do we have the ability to make whoever walks through that door, because you don't always know what the person you're going to be filming looks like until they step into the room. So being able to take very quick judgments on what's going to work best for their face, what's going to work best for their skin, what's going to work best for the clothing they're wearing. So when you get into the fashion side of things, the clothing and that aspect starts to really take a central role, because it's not just about how the model looks, because in theory the model has it all on lockdown. They look great, they look appropriate for the brand, they've been picked for those reasons, and then hair and makeup and styling are going to deal with the rest to some extent, and it's your job to try and impart whatever vibe you can with the lighting, with the camera movement, with the lens choice, and then indeed when you follow that through the chain, through post-production as well. So we've got a few people. I've got my iPad just here, and I'm going to be following through on the chat as we're going. So we've got Nathan, we've got, I'm going to see if I say this right, we've got Alon, and we've also got, I'm going to say Caspian, Pugza. Ooh. Do I know how to pronounce these names correctly? I think I'm getting most of the way there. So cinematic corporate lighting is a challenge. Put this down for a moment. So the biggest challenge that you have when you approach corporate jobs is all of those things that I just mentioned, where you don't actually have necessarily the knowledge of the location and the person that you're going to be filming. On top of that, a lot of the time people aren't very comfortable on camera. So everything that you do has to be tempered to not make them too nervous. So the more lighting and the more equipment you bring in, it can definitely have an effect on how well that person presents. Conversely, once you get to a certain level of presenter, if they walk into a set, you know, and it's all, you've got good stands up, you've got flags, and you know, you've blacked out the windows and everything looks very clean and professional, they're going to think that they've walked onto a professional set and they're going to deliver really well, because they're used to that. If someone's never done it before and they walk into that same situation, it can just be decimating for their morale. They're just thinking, oh my God, all of this for me, I can't possibly do what I've got to do. All of that aside, assuming that you can get the person to feel comfortable and you can position the lighting and all the rest of it without intimidating them too much, there are a number of things that you need to look out for. To start off with, because in the corporate space people aren't models, they're not going to look as good necessarily as models that you would get in to do a fashion shoot. So you've got to be aware of a couple of things. Glasses are a massive thing, because you're going to find that you're in a situation and people have really big glasses, and you suddenly have this light setup that you've set up before they've got there, and you're catching loads of reflections in them. So a couple of things that you can do to avoid this would be use really, really soft light. That is an easy first step. Beyond that, being careful where you position the light. So at the moment, for example, in this space just here now, I have a 60 by 60 softbox, and it is just there. It is pretty much level with my head, top of my head, the bottom of the light. So it's above my head height, pointing down. It isn't necessarily the most flattering light, but it does what it needs to do. I'm looking at the screen just here. I've got light coming in like this. It's illuminating my face. It's fairly soft because of the distance. And beyond that, it doesn't really need to do all that much. It's not going to be in my glasses unless I look up like that, in which case it is going to catch them. And you are going to find that no matter what you do, people are going to find a way to get that light into their glasses. I've got a few examples of the corporate stuff. So what I'm going to do is cut to the computer now, and we're going to delve into what we do on some of the corporate shoots. So I'm going to turn around, cut to the computer. It's going to go black, but hopefully we should still have my voice. And we're just going to switch over to DaVinci Resolve. We've got a good few people in the chat just here. Alon says, good job on the pronunciation. That is great to hear. So I've got loads of things laid out in the chat, in the timeline. And I think we are talking about corporate talking heads at the moment. So let's delve into this one just here. Now, I'm not going to play what the guy's saying. I'm not going to do that to him. But basically, this was an interesting setup for us. Full screen this so we can have a good look at what's going on here. In this scenario, we were actually filming in our own office. This client needed something that looked clean, kind of slightly cool, slightly modern looking. And we thought, well, the easiest way to achieve this is just going to be pick a day when we don't have too many people in because other people are out on shoots, and then they can come in and do their stuff in our office space. And it might look from the face of it that we've just put that person in our office and that's that, but actually there's a lot more going on than this. What I'm going to do is just grab my pen, and we can draw on this and have a look at what different lighting strokes we've actually used to make this happen. So for a start, I'm going to call out this at the back just here. Everything that's going on with the background that looks like a shaft of sunlight is not a shaft of sunlight. That is all a big HMI. So we've got HMI outside the window just here. Because we were filming at our office, we were able to go a little bit overboard with this, I suppose. And we've just set it up so that we actually have an HMI outside blasting in, creating those shafts of light. And that actually goes a long way to creating the vibe that we've got going on in the space just here. Makes it feel sunlit, makes it feel interesting, and it gives you a little bit more in the background than just that plain wall. It's playing on the desks as well somewhat, so lighting up down here, catching on the desk just there, and that's all cool. For his face, we are lighting with a Kinoflow, and we've got a Kinoflow 4-bank just up here, boosting in to the side of his face, so this is all just being lit with that. It's slightly frontal. He's going off on this side to negative a little bit, but not a crazy ratio. We're not trying to make anything that's too dramatic just here, because in this scenario, they don't need it to look really dramatic. They need it to seem clean and cool. They're an architecture firm, so it just needs to have that vibe, and that's really what we've achieved just here. There's another aspect to this, and in fact, actually, I'm going to skip forwards to the next frame. Just roll on, and we should be able to, yeah, just here, have a look at what's going on in his eyes. So we do have the catch light, and that is working quite nicely. That's in just there. Nothing crazy. You can tell it's not a perfect catch light. Personally, I do prefer it when we have the opportunity to have a perfectly round catch light, or if we're using our octadomes or something like that, you have a slightly more interesting light in the eyes. But for a corporate, the Kinoflow works just fine. Downside of the Kinoflows is if you use them vertically, you do kind of get these almost goat eye effects going on, which isn't so nice. But you can see we've got a nice fall off across his face. This side is down, so he has a bit of shape, but it's not crazy down. We probably did put a flag up thinking about it, because we do have fairly light walls on this side just here, just to take down a little bit of what's going on that side of his face. But that's all cool and it's working and it's actually quite nice. I'm just going to have a look at the chat just here. Yeah, okay, quite a few people in there now, mostly just saying hi, hello everybody. So that's what's going on. There's something else which you do have to think about quite a lot. Now we're in our office, so we have the ability to take a bit of time, move things around. We're not worried about what happens with that. I'm going to switch back to talking to camera for this. So with this, the background is super clean. We've just got a couple of iMacs there and no cabling really to see. There's just a tiny bit of cable in there perhaps, and you can see a little bit behind there, but it's pretty much a clean background, and that is incredibly important. If you are going into a space and you don't have much time, but you've got a little bit of time to move things around, look at what is happening in the background. Now here, we have the luxury of it being in our space, and we can move things around. We took loads of hard drives off the side, you know, we're filmmakers. You guys know this, there are going to be hard drives everywhere. So these sides are covered in hard drives and all that kind of stuff. Get rid of all of that, take away control surfaces and all the rest of that. Make it look clean, make it look crisp, and don't worry if you have to fake it. So as long as you don't expect to see something on the screens there, take out everything. Take out every single cable that you can find. You don't want to have a situation where, for example, you've got like an iPhone on a table and the cable's coming off and it's plugged in somewhere. You know, I've got an iPhone cable down here. Immediately, if I walked into a space and someone had a phone on their desk and the cable was kind of, it's super distracting. And this is ridiculous. This doesn't happen like this, except it always seems to. Whenever you go into an office, people have stuff everywhere, cables especially, and then picture frames, and sometimes people are sensitive about it. You know, you've got to be subtle. You've got to say, oh yeah, no, it would be great if we could just, you know, if you're cool with it, just tidy away some of this crap that's everywhere. But it is going to make a huge difference to how your final frame looks. We're going to the extremes here. We've got an HMI outside, you know, that's madness for an interview, but it's cool. And it means that, big thing, the shadows don't move around. So more often than not, when I'm doing a talking head, if there's a window in the shot, I want to know how long we're doing this. I just want to know, when I go into that space, are we going to get screwed by the sun? Is it going to go in? Is it going to come out all of a sudden and burn the entire frame out? Is it going to change dramatically? Is the sunlight like this? But then we're going to be filming for 40 minutes because this person isn't going to be able to get what they need in 10 minutes. It's about the space of time before you notice the sun jumping around. And then as soon as you get to the edit, you're cutting between takes. The sun is jumping back and forth and in and out of clouds and all of that craziness. So more often than not, when we're on corporates, I actually prefer to say, well, let's not have the windows in shot, because we don't know who's coming through that door. We don't know how prepped they are. We don't know if they're going to be able to get this in 1 take or 2 takes or 50 takes. So all of that does definitely factor in. I've got some more talking heads lined up in here. Just going to have a quick gander through the chat. Talking about auto cue. Yeah, okay. Can dig that. So we've got a few different talking heads. I'm going to cut back to the screen view of this and talk through each one as we go. So got this up now. Excuse me while I have a sip of delicious coffee. That's the ASMR cut of this live. Okay, this was actually auto-cued. Interestingly enough, I know that someone just mentioned that. Who mentioned that? So it was Alon. Alon mentioned the auto-cue. So with an auto-cue, you have issues. You need the person to either be looking directly at camera if it's a direct-to-camera auto-cue, like this is, or if they're looking off camera, it's a little bit of a different proposition, and it's more just an eye line at that point, which is still valid. Let's full screen this. Immediately, when we're doing this talking head, this is one from our showreel. It is cool because we've got a bit of time to set up. We've got a paper backdrop, and with that paper backdrop, we're able to actually have something really nice and striking. It's simple. Pink background. Lady is in kind of a tealy, greeny top, and that's really popping. Looks great. We have a little light in the back just boosting onto the paper to fill all of that out. So I'm just going to draw in roughly what's going on there, but that's just kind of, let's change colour. That's just blooming out from here, kind of giving a little bit of like haloing just around the subject. It's not crazy extreme, but if you look sort of down here, you can definitely see it's brighter than up here. That's intentional. We do that with another light behind the subject. And as that's going through, what we're actually going to find is, yes, you can see Kinoflow. So we're lighting this with a Kinoflow tube. It's horizontal. It's off this side just here. You can tell because this side of Our Lady's face is more lit. This side is a lot more down, but that's fine. I like that. We've got good shaping on a jawline. She's got a great jawline anyway, so that's working really nicely. Hair is something you actually need to be aware of when you're doing this, because if, for example, we were lighting from this side, we might find that because her hair's a little bit further forwards, we get a hard shadow line coming down because the hair is so close to her face that it kind of occludes the light completely, and you get a really harsh shadow coming across, which can move as the subject moves, which isn't necessarily what you want. So calling out that Kinoflow just there, it's not the ideal catch light for me, but it's relatively self-contained, and because of the height of the light, we're not actually getting it in her glasses at all, and she's got fairly large glasses. So if you're finding that you do end up with a subject who has large glasses and that light is catching them, you can raise the light up a little bit, or actually you can bring the light closer to the subject. The closer the light gets, I'll cut back to this, the closer the light gets to your subject, the less likely it is that it's going to get into your glasses as a reflection. So if it's really far away, the chances in the glasses is actually pretty high, especially if they move their head around at all. The closer you bring it, and you can imagine here that angle of incident to the glasses is becoming greater and greater and greater, it is less likely to fall in the glasses. Now, there is a point at which this is going to detrimentally impact your lighting, and the closer you bring it to the subject, the brighter that light is going to be on them. They are going to be catching more light. So if it's here and you move it here, well, inverse squaring, you kind of doubled the amount of light falling on your subject at that point. So that might have implications for what your backlight's doing. It might have implications for what the rest of the scene's doing, or it might just be super bright and distracting for your subject and they feel a little bit uncomfortable, depending on the kind of light you're using as well. If you're using tungsten fixtures, that's going to get hotter and hotter for them. If you're using even Kinoflows, actually, people, it never ceases to amaze me. We bring the light in and they sit under the lights, they go, oh, it's hot under here, isn't it? First time they've ever done it, and they just kind of sit there and feel the heat of the lights. Now, Kinoflows aren't actually really hot at all in the scheme of things, but you can feel the temperature and they're nervous and the lights on them, and that all plays in. So bringing that light in closer has other implications. So if you find that you are actually quite close already, just take it up a couple of inches. Helps if you have a crew with you, or at least an assistant, because that way you could be looking at the monitor, just making sure that you're watching to see when that light is going out of the glasses. This does require, of course, the cooperation of your subject, but assuming that they're comfortable and they're happy to sit there, and if you could just say, okay, if you just move your head around just side to side a little bit, get them to sit in their chair comfortably, and make sure that they're going to stay in that position, not move. It's important that they're comfortable, but equally, when you're doing something like this, the lady's standing up just here, but if she was sitting down, because we can only see her head and shoulders, this is going off tangential. It's not part of the lighting point, but it is important. If she was sitting down, we can only see her head and shoulders. If she leans back, then you get this slightly weird look. And the further back someone leans in the chair, it could be quite possible that someone would sit in their chair like this and lean back. And maybe they'd sit like that, and they're presented to camera. We've had it a couple of times. Either it happens naturally throughout an interview, someone just naturally likes to sit back and talk like this, or maybe they're just getting relaxed and, you know, they get comfortable and they just lean back a bit. Either way, it can look absolutely crazy because you only see this part of their head. They're leaning back, they're kind of looking down like this, and it looks terrible. So always make sure that the person is sitting up. And whenever you tell someone to sit up, they always go, oh dear, you know, I didn't know that I was not sitting up straight. And so bedside manner, try to be delicate about it, explain to them, oh, it's the camera, you know, close lens, it looks strange if you're not sitting up really straight, even though you are sitting up straight, haha. Get a little bit of banter going so that you can set them at ease as you're doing this, because you're going to be making changes. You're changing the light. Now you're saying you're changing how they're sitting. Now you're making sure they're not in a swivelly chair, because if they're on a swivelly chair, they might move. So, oh, yeah, we need to do that. We need to make sure you're not going to tap your foot. People tap their foot. Happens all the time. Someone will just be sitting there and you'll hear this little tapping and they're tapping their foot. So all of these things that you're going to have to ask people to do when you're doing corporates means that you need to get a rapport going with them. You need to be making them comfortable. Now, this isn't part of the cinematic lighting, but to be honest, people will remember this more. If you are able to seem calm and assured that you know, it's going to look good and they're going to look good and you're happy and you're conversing with them and you're telling them things as you're doing stuff, but you don't need to overload them with knowledge, just letting them know that there's certain things happening. Then it all helps to set them at ease, and that's what they remember. And then they look back at the video and the lighting looks good, and that's what they see then at that point, but they haven't really paid any attention to what was happening with the lighting up until that point. And then they go, oh yeah, no, that was fantastic. Yeah, I remember that guy. I remember Alon, he was great. You know, he was really made me feel comfortable, set me at ease. You know, oh yeah, he used all these interesting things and he was doing this thing with lighting and I had to sit up straight. And it helps to sell you as a professional who knows what they're talking about and is able to get the best out of people, because that's what really all of these things are about. I'm going to cut to another couple now, so going back to the screen just here, see if anyone's coming in. Practicals in lighting. Oh yes. And question from Instagram: how do you light the background so it doesn't have light hit your subject? Oh, that's a good one. We will definitely come back to that one. Now I'm going to skim through these because this is all just from our talking head showreel. This is actually an interesting one. We've got a relatively straightforward setup just here. Our talking head showreel has all kinds of corporates in, so we've got graphics and stuff which Paolo does. We've got a whole team who make these happen and make them look fantastic. Right, let's draw on this. So for this one, I actually think we had a octodome for this, octobox, off to this side just here. And that's boosting in, lighting our lovely lady just here. She's got great light on her. It's falling off on this side, so you can see all around her jaw and down here. We are getting that fall off, but I like that. It shapes people. It gives them a little bit of interest, and it means that she stands out against the background just here. And in the background, we have similar setup, actually. I believe actually, these two weren't done at the same time, but very similar to the other one, where we have a grey paper. And obviously it's falling off as we go off to this side just here, and indeed over here as well. But around the center, we have that light blooming out just to give them a little bit of focus, so it just zones everything in. You can enhance it in post, but we like to actually make it happen for real on the shoot if we can. Take all of that off. So we've got an octo box on subject just there, and then one light on the background. Most of these are just two light setups, to be honest. And let's skim through. So she's talking about all of this. Go to the wide. Same for the wide. All working nicely. And you can see more what's going on with the background just there as well, because we've got that really expanded view of what that background light is doing for us. Now this one's interesting because you can actually see a little bit of the setup going on. We have a Kinoflow off to the right hand side just there, and that Kinoflow is going through a 4x4 silk. Off to the left we have a 60x60 softbox, just acting as a little bit of an edge, kind of edge side hair light, you know, that kind of thing. We've got one light just boosting into the back. This looks like a green screen shoot. It's not a green screen shoot. Green is just their corporate color. So we're doing a similar thing with the paper back just there to give it a little bit of pop with that light down on the floor. In fact, sorry, I'm just going to draw on these as I'm talking. So we've got a light down there. We've got the 60x60 softbox just there. Kinoflow through the silk. It's a little bit of a mouthful. Ursa's up here, and that's actually rigged for a auto cue, but we didn't use it on the shoot. And then in the room at the back, this is an interesting one, we've got another two Kinoflows going in that room, just boosting up into the ceiling, so that the background isn't going super dark and it's not just black behind that. So that's a relatively straightforward setup for us. We've got three lights really for the subject. We've blacked out everything because this is all windows on this side, so everything's blacked out there. We decided not to black out this side and just have that as diffusion. So we've got diffusion frame up just there, and that's giving us a little bit of general ambient. It's a fairly cloudy day, so levels stay fairly consistent, which is cool. Let's just skim through, jump to some other things, and that's an example of some of these shots as well. Okay, these are all just corporate talking heads. Okay, this is a fun one. You guys might like this. Alon is asking, how long before shooting starts do you arrive at location, and do you ask for pictures, location scouts first? He says it normally takes an hour for everything. Sometimes that's not enough. Okay, before I jump into this, I'll just cut back and address that as well. So When we arrive at location, we do definitely try and get there an hour before, as a minimum. That is minimum we want to set up. In some cases, we have someone do a location scout for us. So someone from the company who's perhaps in charge of booking in the shoot and arranging it will say, okay, we're going into one of your meeting rooms. That's a fairly standard scenario. Could you take a picture of the meeting room, just a couple of pictures on an iPhone, a couple of different angles, so we have a rough idea of what's going on, if there are any windows, if there's anything in there that we can't address, we like to ask about it. So for example, a lot of big companies have lights on an automatic circuit. So if there's no movement in the room, they'll turn off. If there's movement in the room, they turn on, and you can't actually control them. So they'll have sensors in the roof or something like that. If that is the case, we need to know about it so we can take a flag or something like that to address it. Sometimes you don't find out about that until you get to the location, but at that point you've kind of just got to work with what you've got, so not much you can do. I would say if we're doing a talking head and we've been there before, we can have everything set inside of 30 minutes. So that's lights up, cameras on, everything framed and ready to go, everything set dressed, but that's assuming that we've done that location before. With some clients, we do go back to the same places, so we have a pretty good idea of what we're going to get in that place at any time, and we can deal with it. Other times, we have no time at all. We literally run in, have to set up, and we had a really, really tight turnaround on something where we were filming someone's house. I don't have an example of this on the computer here, but we were filming in their house. They had no time. They were very senior at the company. They really wanted to do this video. The only time they had was, it might have even been on Saturday, I can't remember, but they had like a 40-minute slot at their house. So we just had to run in, and quite literally 40 minutes was, they have 40 minutes for us to get in, set up, get everything working, film it, and get out as well. There was no time to mess around. So in that situation, we just kind of have to know what works. And it's something that I do say to people when they're starting out at Still Moving. We have a lot of more junior team members who have come on recently. Something they need to look at when they go on shoots is how much equipment they take, because we have access to so much stuff now that you could drown yourself on a shoot by taking too much equipment. And that's a really dangerous thing to do. If you take too many cameras, take too many lens options, you take too many extra bits of kit, like for example, we could take 5 flags and 3 diffusion frames and a load of stands. Well, you won't be done unloading in 40 minutes. It's going to take you 40 minutes just to get everything out of the van to set it up. So knowing that you can get to a location, walk in and just take a moment, that's important, and look around and go, okay, if I had to do it right now, if the person walked through the door and said, we've got to go now, what 3 things can I do, assuming that I can get the camera on the tripod in time? What 3 things can I do to make this better? Well, maybe it's choose the right angle. So you go in, you look at the room, choose an angle that's going to work, or that you think is going to work. It's all a snap judgment at that point. You just got to trust your instincts, look for things that are going to help you out, like leading lines, clean backgrounds. If you have to do a ton of set dressing, like I was talking about earlier, moving cables and things, that's not the best angle to do if you've got no time. If you've got time, make it work, but you judge that. And then you add things on as you go. So, okay, we found a good angle. Move a couple of things around. Maybe things are distracting, so we just push things out of the way. Move a chair, just make it work. Okay, we've got an angle that works. Great. Lighting. Can we do anything with the lighting? Maybe that's not an active stroke. So maybe with the lighting, you're actually saying, well, we're going to cut that window out. We're going to take this top light off this person and just let the window light do it. If you can go beyond that, then you say, okay, now maybe we bring a light in. Or maybe we're saying, we're going to just run this with a bounce, you know? So knowing what the limitations are and how much time you have definitely helps. The more time we have, the more complicated we can get with our setups. And some of these examples, this one just here, is actually a really interesting one, because for this, we're outside. If you've ever done any filming of interviews outside, you'll know that it's very, very tricky to modify anything. So I'm just going to have a sip of coffee. I've been following some wonderful coffee channels in lockdown. So James Hoffman, he's a British guy who has a level of sophistication, shall we say, that I aspire to. And he's a fascinating fellow. And anyone who knows me knows I love coffee. We're going on another tangent here. This is a journey. This is a story. I've been using, because I can't go to the coffee shop, and I used to make my own coffee. I used to have a Gaggia Classic. and that was kind of okay. It was cool, but never really got as good as I would like to have got with it. This is with a flare and a Bellman steamer, and it is excellent. I've become very good at making coffee in lockdown, very good. And this is delicious. It's a ristretto shot. It's slightly shorter than espresso, and well, you know, in America, if you're in America, it's probably about time for a coffee. If you're in LA, what's it going to be like 10:30 in the morning there? But that is a delicious shot. Tiny bit of steam milk in there, fantastic. In any event, filming outside, you've got so many things that are against you. The direction you choose to shoot in is very often dictated by the sun, but sometimes you want to see something. So, for example, just here, we wanted to see that there was blue sky behind him and there was water, because these guys were going to row across the Atlantic, and that was a suitable background. In the other direction, the way he's facing, it's just green and trees and stuff, so that wouldn't necessarily be the right background for him. Couple of problems here. The sun is coming in straight this way, which is not good for what we're doing. It's blasting all across the back. Just there you can see that the background is pretty hot in terms of light just bouncing off the boats and things there. So what do? We actually ended up with loads and loads of stuff around this, cut to the frame, and I will draw in what we're doing. So we got craziness here going on, really, for an outdoor setup. We had tons of neg on this side, had a big, I think it was 2 or 3 meter neg on this side, just taking him down, because you're never going to get that level of negative on the side of someone's face just standing out on a sunny day like this. It's not going to happen. So he's facing the sun, but we're not actually letting the sun hit him. We've got another diffusion frame just here, 2-stop diffusion in front of him. So this is stopping all of the sunlight that's on him. So that's two stops, 1.75, or maybe it's 1.25 stop. So that's 1.25 stop of diff on him. Now the problem then is that we're taking his level down on his face so much that actually he's going to be completely removed from the background. So then we did another thing. We got a reflector bounce. I believe it was just a 1 meter by 1 meter bounce, and we put it off kind of over here, scooting the light so that it... Ooh, that app doesn't like staying uncrashed today. So the light scoots across and hits his face at that point. So you actually end up with this hard edge coming across here. Now I actually quite liked that. Normally I wouldn't go for an edge. I'm going to do it in red so you can see it. This all down his eye just here, and you see the bright catchlight in his eye there, and then the 2 meter frame catchlight is in that eye. You can really tell, and it is still in this eye, but you can't quite see it as much. So that is 3 frames to do this. You got neg on the right hand side just there. I'm just going to use an arrow to do it. So neg is on here. We've got diffusion frame just across here, just chopping all of that light down so we don't get any direct on him. And then the bounce frame just here, just skipping everything into the side of his face. And it actually worked really nicely. I like the way that this sits because it feels like it's by the sea. It has that kind of vibe to it. So it doesn't necessarily matter that he's got a very hot highlight. I think that actually works for this particular scenario. Just going to have a quick look. Oh, good. I'm glad that we like the tangent there. I will make you a coffee if we ever get out of lockdown. So, white bounce board on interviews. Oh, DeLonghi cappuccino. And the trick is to pick good beans. Definitely the case there. Good. So with this interview, we had to work quick because if we didn't, we weren't going to be able to get out and get rowing in time. And that was important because we needed to get over to the Isle of Wight. We need to get all of our awesome black arm shots of these two guys doing their stuff. So all of the prep of the boats and things there. We haven't got all of the black arm stuff in here, unfortunately, I don't think. So that's just all of there. Oh, there's some of it there. And then we're back onto other things. Yeah. So that's an interesting approach to an outdoor interview, which is much more challenging because you don't have the options to hold back the light in that scenario. It's a very difficult one. Now I'm going to do one more corporate, and it's this one just here. This is tricky. I said earlier that I will try and avoid background windows more often than not in corporates, and it always happens. I know you guys are going to know this. We've all been there. You go into a client space and they go, oh, we've got a fantastic view. We can see the whole of whatever city you're in or whatever landmarks there. We can just see all of that, and it'd be great to get that in. And you look out the window and it's like summer and it's bright, and you just go, oh my God, there's no way. And I've seen so many corporate interviews where people have been tempted into doing this by the client. The client says, oh yeah, no, we've got this fantastic view, and you just see it. And it's either a blown out window, just smack bang behind them with harsh edges and just awful, or you've got some poor soul who wanted to be filmed against this wonderful cityscape, and they're just a silhouette, and it's just awful. So we have for years fought against that, and I will be quite strict. I've become jaded as I got older and as I've done more shoots, and it's hard sometimes to, we talk about the rapport that you have to have with your clients earlier. It is hard to say to someone, no, it won't work. They go, oh, but it's great, and it's can't you light it? And you just cry and you think, oh my God, do I have to get a light meter out and explain how light works? And it just, there's no way to compete with that level of light. If you have direct sunlight in something, you are fighting a losing battle. But that doesn't always mean that we don't end up shooting against a window, because sometimes you just have to. And if we're going into it and we know now we have big HMIs and we can just about make it work, but it really is a balancing act to do it. Some people do crazy stuff, like they will bring ND gels and they will literally just gel a window down so that you win that way by having the outside a little bit darker relative to the inside. Definitely a way of approaching it. But doing ND gels is tricky. They're hard to handle. You've got to have your technique down. You know, people do it with squeegee and water and putting it on. Sometimes people have done it with like a net, big net frames that you could put in the background, but then you've definitely got to make sure they're out of focus. And if they're not, it can look a little bit weird. So we've tried to avoid it. This example just here, we did for a client for Black History Month, and we had to do, I forget how many interviews, but I think it was 5 interviews in this kind of meeting room floor of their offices. And we only had certain meeting rooms for a certain amount of time. So we did the bulk of them in one meeting room, and then we had to move because meeting rooms get booked. This was what was available. We had to move to another room for the last interview because the guy was much later in the day. So that room was really hard to work. It was a very small corner meeting room. So a lovely meeting room in the context of what they're doing, because they can see out, and it's got 2 sets of floor to ceiling windows, and you've just got light coming in from everywhere. And then the other 2 walls have like a TV at a slightly awkward height, and then a shelf with coffee and tea and stuff. All very nice, you know, really nicely done, but just distracting. And then obviously the door's just here. So you've got this trifecta of difficult things. You either end up shooting out the window, or you shoot against a really uninspiring wall. Now you can make walls look interesting, and if it's a bigger room I might have gone for it, but this one had too many distractions at head height, and I hate it when we have an interview and something's cutting across their eye line. Or I have put people on Apple boxes, built a whole platform of Apple boxes just to raise them up so that something within the room that we can't move is not at their sort of head height at a distracting level, so that we can shoot down on it a bit or up on it, whatever we're doing to get around that. So here we had no choice, and we had to go with it, and I thought, okay, I can do this, and I'll show you how we did it. So cut to the screen. It's a relatively nice frame. I actually quite like the way it came out. I think that the guy looks good in it. It works. We've got quite a lot of down on the right hand side of his face, but I like that. It's kind of cool, you know, it's a little bit more cinematic. We talk about cinematic. That was the original question. I'm sorry, Alona, I've gone so far off piste here that we're no longer talking about cinematic, but we've come full circle to it now. So on this side of his face, it is down, which is cool, but we've got a little bit of edge coming in down here, and on his head, just cutting him out a tiny bit. And then on this side of his face, he's got the light that we're bringing in, a little bit of light from the windows. That's that. Look at the eyes. Wonder if anyone can see that. In his eyes just there, we've got a catch light, and it is wow, not perfect. It's not bad for what we had, because we only went in with a certain setup. We had two Kinoflows. Actually, we had three Kinoflows, but we could only get two really in the space to make any difference to this. So I'm going to show you what cheat we did. Let's see, just skim forward. Let's jump to this one. Right, this is the wide shot, and here we start to see all of the cheating that's going on. So a couple of things to call out with that. One, these are Kinoflows. They are in shot. I kind of took the view that it was much better in this case to have the Kinoflows as close as humanly possible. I would have got them closer. I would have cut into this window just here. If the table hadn't been there. The table, we couldn't move. You often find it in office blocks. Tables are locked in position. And when a table's locked in position, it'll be locked in because of the cabling. Sometimes they're really heavy. Sometimes they've got like phones and network and power running up to them. That was the case here. So we couldn't move it. And that's as close as I could get the Kinoflows. It gives just enough light that it isn't crazy ridiculous on his face. Because if he didn't have that Kinoflow light, it would be a really hard ratio from this building in the back. And this is more blown out than I would like, but it works okay because you can see enough of the city and things. And with that previous shot on the close, I think it works quite nicely. See a little bit of Kinoflow there, but we lose it in the reflection, so I wasn't too fussed about it. We actually then removed the Kinoflow from shot. I just comped it out, copied a bit of this wall, pasted it in, and got rid of it. I would have bitten the bullet and rebuilt the side of this building if I'd have had to. And the microphone, again, yeah, I always take the view, get the microphone closer, as long as it's not going to cross their head as they move, or hands, anything like that. Get the microphone as close as you can, and then just paint it out, and that works fine. So that scenario is my nightmare, but you can make it work. You can do it. It is definitely something you can get around if you have even a basic kit there. 2 Kinoflows is a relatively straightforward kit. If we had HMIs, we'd have cooked him. It would have been it would have been impossible to use them in that space. So even if we'd had more, it wouldn't have been suitable. Talking earlier about bringing the lighting closer, it would be too much. It's a tiny room. You cook your subject, they sweat, they don't look good. Defeats the purpose of you being there, making them look all professional and good in their office space. So Kinoflows are cool. A lot of the time now people are moving over to LEDs. So we're on the Broncolor F160 LEDs, and they can be strapped into all kinds of modifiers. I know that a lot of people use LED equivalents of Kinoflows. You've got quasar tubes and all the rest of it. So there's plenty of options, and you can get really punchy lights in a small size. So even something like this, the Lycos panels, if you're in a dark room, that's tons of light, plenty. So you can diffuse that, make it bigger, make it soft, make it flattering. If ever you're in doubt about what to do with someone, don't go with a harsh ratio. I've gone with a harsh ratio here because I knew what I was aiming for, and in fact, I think I've actually got with this, do I have somewhere, I was sure that I had some behind the scenes shots of this guy, because I might not be able to find the BTS photos. Well, this will be interesting. I don't think I've got this particular setup, but I've got a few. So let's just cut to this and full screen them, and then I'll move on to a different question because I have lingered on this for a while. So within this setup just here, we have a few, yeah. So this is using a Broncolor Para 133, and that's giving us a circular catch light, which is really cool. This is one of the setups that we saw earlier, actually, or a very similar one. You can see we've got a little bit of flagging going on the right. We've got a Kinoflow boosting up into the ceiling, and then we just got our 2 cameras. Again, it's a pretty straightforward setup. 2 lights. I don't tend to do the whole 3-point lighting thing all that much. Most of the time, I will just favor 2 lights, maybe a light and a background light. That's what we've got going on just here. This is some of the paper background stuff that we saw earlier. That's, again, Octobox over a table. I'll come back to that. So this one's kind of cool. We have, this Kinoflow isn't actually on. This light is pretty much all that's playing, and this one over here, just draw around those for you. So we've got that one there, just bouncing into the ceiling, giving general light to some of the stuff that's happening in the background just here. And then this is everything. This is what's giving you the light. And that's pretty close. That's a pretty large source. That's a Broncolor Para 133. So we've got the LED light in there, and it gives you a nice circular light, beautiful, slightly above head height, and you don't need anything else. That's it. Killing all of the lights in the location here, shutting the curtains, making sure that we can control everything, and that's how we roll. That is what we do day in, day out when we're not in lockdown. Aha! This is the setup. So this is what our guy a moment ago would have seen. We have our Kinoflows just here. 8 banks of Kinoflow power. Oh, it cracks me up looking at this. We've got Ben and Rathika just there. They may be tuned into the chat. If they are, that is them setting up the cameras. You can see we're smacked against the back wall there. That is the wall we would have had to shoot against pretty much if we didn't shoot against this. So you can see why we chose to go this way. And then I've got some neg just here, and that's why we've got the downside on the guy, because the neg is doing all of that. Lights in the room we will have shut off, because you can shut them off in this building, I recall. So yeah, that is as close. Just imagine, the guy's sitting at the table just here. The Kinoflows are just there. I'm sure I was apologetic and sort of said, hey, you know, we just got to work it. But that's an iPhone, whatever the latest one is, X on wide. And you just know that room is tiny. Very, very nice room. Looks fantastic, but tiny. So yeah, you can work it. You can do it. That's one Lasterlight frame, 1 meter by 2 meter, 2 Kinoflows. Hey, you can't say that we always run with crazy setups, because we do some stuff which has really pared down. Ah, okay, this is fun. So the lady we saw at the beginning on the grey paper in the showreel, this is a setup that we will have used for her. So we've got the silk just here, call that out. So we've got a silk just here, pushing the Kinoflow through that, and then you can see that haloing going on with that'll be a Bronco F 160 with like a reflector on just in the background to give you that nice vignetted look. Rathika and Nauki this time. That is the back of Nauki's head. I don't know it anywhere. Got some neg just here, and the neg just there is a 4x4 floppy. 4x4 floppy is just there to prevent anything from spilling onto the background, so it stops the Kinoflow from going everywhere. But 2 light setup, 1 Kinoflow, a silk in front of it just to soften it off a little bit, and then something for the background. No 3-point lighting, really straightforward, still looks good, still looks clean. Sometimes you can go too far with lighting stuff and end up making it overcomplicated so that you actually lose track of what you're trying to get out of it. I'm just going to have a skim through the chat now, because I know that a lot of people have been talking. I've just been talking and talking. I will literally talk all night, so I've got to rein myself in. Right, so we've answered Alon's question, talked a little bit about coffee, which was cool. In Virginia, it was 1:30, and he's still drinking coffee, so that is 1:30 in the PM, I believe, in Virginia. Hard light, looks. Thank you very much. That was Andrew Thomas Clifton saying the light on him looks nice, like bounce off the water. That is, I'm glad you said that, because that is the vibe that we were hoping we'd be able to evoke with it, and the location is going to do a lot for you. So if you know that you're going to a location and it has a certain vibe, you can get away with things. Sometimes things look appropriate for the location, whether that's an office block with the lighting just there. We get away with it because it's just on the edge of acceptable levels, ratios between the background outside and what's in the foreground, and having that dark on him just helps to refine it because we have an edge as well. Just getting there. Top soft light for fashion shoot. Ooh, okay. And have we ever worked with ND on Windows? I have tried it once or twice, and I mentioned it a moment ago. Having ND on Windows is cool, but it's just so hard to wrangle. And a lot of the time, you don't necessarily know what size the windows are. So you're going out with an ND roll of gel, and you're trying to put it on the windows. You've got to cut it, you've got to position it right. If you don't position it just right, you get little peaks of light coming through, and it can look really dodgy. So if I was doing a big narrative scene and I wanted to compete with outdoor light, and I didn't want to have to bring in bigger fixtures, and that scenario, then yeah, you can say maybe we've got more crew. I would consider it, but more often than not, I don't go with it. I just avoid the windows or bring in bigger lights if I need to. Sometimes you go into an office and they actually have ND'd windows. You find this quite a lot in very modern office blocks. They will have slight ND on the windows where they have those big floor-to-ceiling windows to mitigate a little bit of the sunlight that they have coming in, so it doesn't get too hot and it isn't too intense, especially when they've got those big windows. So, next question. Hey, Filmmakers World, great to see you. How are you doing? Cool. So we'll do the fashion thing. Let's just have a quick look at this. So to sum up all of that, corporates are tough. You don't know who you're getting, you don't know the room you're getting, but regardless of the light that you have, just try and make it soft, try and make it flattering, bring it in slightly above the subject, and then just edge it around. If you can do it with someone and just move it back and forth, trying to find the right position, you're going to get there a lot more quickly than doing it by yourself and just kind of guessing. When you've done it for a while, you develop a little bit of a taste for it and it will become easier. So, fashion, let us have a look. I've got a couple of things for top lit actually, so we can skim through these and it should be quite cool. Okay, this was a shoot that we did with Broncolor with an awesome ballerina, Sophie Duncan. There's Sophie. And this whole shoot was to show off their new light. So the idea with this is that we're trying to show scenarios where, as a filmmaker, I could use their light modifiers and their LED lights with the battery packs to be able to go out to a location and create something really cool in the fashion space. That's really the space where people who do fashion photography will know Broncolor from. A lot of filmmakers probably won't be so familiar with them. We are very heavily affiliated with Broncolor, Still Moving and myself, so read into that what you will. We're obviously going to say that the product is good, but it's all made in Switzerland, really nice quality stuff, so we like it and we're happy to kind of get behind it, and they do interesting stuff like this with us, which is kind of fun as well. So this one has top light all over the place for this whole sequence just here. So that is the wide shot, and we've got a lot of cheating going on here. I love cheating, and we're going to see how we cheated this. So, you get to a location, it is nighttime. This is on the roof of a car park, not particularly glamorous, but kind of cool juxtaposition with ballerina in the middle of the night out in this slightly brutalist car park. So we've got light coming down from the top just here, and that is the same as what you see in the background just there. It's just one of those. They're kind of LED lights. You can see they've got a bit of a blue tint to them, and then in the background you've got like a tungsten or something in this kind of lift shaft just here, so that's a little bit orangey down there. And then the rest of the place, I believe down here, is just lots of fluorescence. So we've got a lot of color temperatures going on, but it works for the wide. In this wide shot, I'm doing nothing. Because we are so far away and we need to establish where she is, and she's just there if you haven't spotted her, we need to know that this is the location she's in. And we can see from this that that light is coming straight down, top lighting her. We're going to cheat by having that light coming top down for these shots as well, but we are doing that with the Broncolor. So for this, we have a big octabox above her, and that is, let's do this red, that is right over her just here. This is a terrible octabox. Coming down like this, and that has the added benefit of cutting out all of the nasty LED light from that lamppost, and it's playing completely on her arm just there. Got lovely, lovely fall off to a dark just there, and then she's getting a slight return just sort of like off her clothes and things. Beautiful light just down the side of her face, just catching enough, and on the hair. So I love how that frame looks, and I love that the skin tone, the quality of it is just perfect. Really cold, hard background as well, with all these bars and steps, and works for me. I think it looks great. So moving on from that, we see again the same setup. She's quite a lot closer to the light here, so if I was being picky and I'm looking at this, I know that the light is maybe 3-4 feet out of frame just there on a big boom arm coming over and illuminating, top lighting, everything down like that. So you can see actually it's a lot hotter on her head and on her ballet shoes just there than it was even sort of further down her arm just here, or when she was on the steps, because we're going to inverse square our way to having that brighter on her. But no, you know, who's going to notice that? We've got practicals in the background just playing in there, and we've got the stuff down here just coming from all of those fluorescent fixtures in the rest of the car park. So we're just dealing with the light that's on her, trying to make her look good in this scenario. So it's all top lit for this section. And, you know, there it is. That looks so cool. When we were doing the shoot, it was late, it was cold. We were all working really hard to get all of the shots that we needed, and we've been up since like crack of dawn doing things, but that makes it worth it. We've got beautiful top lighting all down our arm, down our leg just there. And the thing with a big soft top light is it doesn't feel like a downlighter would. So if you were in your kitchen and you've got a little tiny halogen spotlight and it's coming down like this, it feels really specular and hard, and you end up with lots of hard shadows. This has wonderful fall off, really soft, really nice. And I think that when I'm doing stuff, historically I was always afraid of top light, because the only top light you really experience is like you go into office, you've got fluorescent top lights, try and get rid of those when you're walking around your house, or if you're walking through like, I don't know, spaces where they need to light things very efficiently, they'll use hard lights coming straight down, and it gives you tons of light, like in a kitchen, for example. Tons of spotlights with halogen, always in kitchens. But it looks terrible. You get hard shadows under the eyes, glasses cast a shadow down like that, which looks really bad. It's going to give someone a nose shadow like that. This is a different beast. This is, the Octobox is Octo 150, I think, for this, so it's like that big. Huge source, and it's very soft because it's going through 2 layers of diffusion, so it's going to have a different effect. It's not the same beast as traditional hard top lights that you might experience in the everyday world would be. Let's cut back to that. Skimming through, skimming through. Ah, okay, yeah. So this whole section is the top light section. Then this, let's talk about this for a moment, because I love this too much. We were on a shoot doing this, didn't want to get a moonlight shot, that wasn't part of the shoot, but happened to be a blood moon. Just turned around and there's this crazy huge moon. Now moonlight, oh, here's a tricky one. You might imagine that moonlight's actually really low in level, and you would be right if you try and film something just with moonlight illuminating it. Gonna have another sip of coffee. Anyone tuning in now has missed the coffee rant, but that is a delicious coffee. So lighting something with moonlight is incredibly difficult to do. You can sort of do it now, sort of, with a really high sensitivity camera, and I've seen a few people experimenting with it, and yeah, it's fine. There's so many drawbacks. You're talking about a light source which is actually pretty hard. You'd think moonlight might be soft or something like that. No, not at all. I used to do a lot of time-lapse photography, and something that you very quickly learn is moonlight casts shadows. You can't necessarily see them most of the time. It's not something you'll notice if you're in a city. Moonlight casts shadows just like the sun. When the moon rises, it rises like the sun, and you see the shadows being really long, and then as the moon goes up, the shadows get short. It is a miniature sun. It's a lot dimmer than the sun, but it has the same qualities for all intents and purposes. So to think that we're going to get any light off this moon onto her, no way. But here's the pinch. It's a practical in shot. It's there, and it's actually really bright. If you ever tried to take a picture of the moon, it's usually just a blown out circle. Okay, if you stop down a lot, then it's not, but then all of your foreground interest, if you're out doing some crazy shot of, I don't know, a mountain or something, the chances that you get the moon exposed and the mountain exposed are pretty slim. You'd have to use like a grad ND or something, which sounds crazy for a night time lapse. I digress. The point here is that to do this shot, we've got to fight any number of different things. We've got to fight the fact the moonlight's not going to play on her, obviously. The moon's really bright in shot, so we need light on her, and we need a fair amount of light on her, but not too much, because otherwise we're going to lose the moon. And that moon is enormous. Anyone who has tried to do a shot of the moon and get it big in shot will know that you need to use a very long telephoto lens to achieve that. Now actually here we cheated a number of things. At this point the moon is just risen, and it's going to rise really fast. If the trick you use for sunlight is if you hold your hand out like this, don't look at the sun. If you hold your hand out like that and the sun is 4 fingers away, I forget what the equation is, it's like every finger's 5 minutes, I think. So you know that you can roughly work out when the sun's coming down how many minutes of sunlight you have until the sun completely sets. Similar situation with the moon. You're talking over the course of 20 minutes here, you're going to have it move completely, especially to get her in shot with it as well. So we had to move so fast, and we were trying to get all the other shots. This was a bonus, and I just kind of went, we've got to get this. So for this, we went on a 70-200, which is a pretty slow lens, f2.8, and we want to stop down a little bit for a number of reasons, which I will go into. We had to go a long way away, limited on how far we can go back, but a 70-200 on an Ursa Pro is what this was. It still wasn't long enough to get the moon that big. So I used the crop sensor mode, and I did the crop sensor mode because I wanted to frame it up perfectly and know what I was getting there and then, rather than doing 4.6K and then pulling it in post. Also wanted to make sure I was perfectly sharp and be able to do a focus pull on it, which was going to be tricky if you zoomed out. So zoomed in, then that's like a 2x crop, so you're at 400 on Super 35, which is getting to the realms where you get this big moon in shot. But because you cropped into the sensor, because you cropped into the center of the lens, and you're going to notice all the deficiencies around that, I had to stop down. So I stopped down a bit, which is fine because we need the moon to be exposed. You need to stop down even at 2.8 to get the moon properly exposed. And then we just brought the broncolor in. For this, it was, I think it was in a beauty dish, and we had it just off to the side here. I had them carefully dialing in the color temperature, carefully dialing in the intensity so that we get this light on her. And the cheat here is, obviously, that is meant to feel like the moon is lighting her. Doesn't work like that. The moon would not be lighting her like this. This is coming from the side. And you see this kind of cheat all the time. Obviously, that's what we build our whole empire as cinematographers, as people who light things on. So having the light coming in slightly sidey, cheating it, no one's going to notice. It feels like she's being lit by the moon. Of course, you show that to someone, go, yeah, got this lovely moonlit shot. Of course the moon is lighting her. Why wouldn't it be? You know, it's all down the edge of her face. So that's just a beauty dish, maybe 2 feet above her head, boosting in, dialed in the level, dialed in the color temperature, and it's really cool. It's so over the top dramatic as well. I love it. It's a little bit, let's cut to this so you can see it properly. So I'll play that through. She comes out. And the hair blows, oh God. So for me, that just feels like an old samurai film or something. It's over the top, so like slightly, I don't want to say stiff movement, but determined kind of movement and look and hair, and yeah, so much fun. So that is the toplit section done. Had a little sojourn into what we were doing with Moonlight just there. This section is again the beauty dish. So we've got, I think it was Rathika and Naoki running along the side here, following her, just edging her with the beauty dish, pretending that that is all happening. Let's cut to this so you can see it. Pretending that all of that is happening from those lights just there. And at this point we're just after sunset, so maybe 40-50 minutes after sunset. So we've still got something in the sky, and that's just edge lighting her down the side. You see we've got a long shadow, so clearly that long shadow would not be coming from these lights. They would be a lot more toppy. So we're lighting her from off the side here with beauty dish. Comes across fantastic. Does the job. Let's have a quick look and see what's happening in the chat, because I'm just presenting to the camera and looking at the screen. I'm not seeing the chat as we're going through. Nathan Ryan. Okay. Hey, Driven Films in the house. How you doing? We've got Marco in there and Glenn. Bicolor light. So the benefit for us, the reason I like the broncolors, is we have a lot of broncolor equipment. So it actually fits very nicely within our ecosystem. I'm going to turn this off because I'm going to cough. Don't want to deafen everyone. So that's a real benefit for us. If you are getting into this, then you need to consider the lighting modifiers that you're going to use. Natural choice for us. We've got softboxes, we've got the paras. We do a lot of fashion work, so the broncolor actually has a lot of weight within that realm, and people love the look that you get from them, especially the big parabolic reflectors. We've got every single one, so small ones, big ones. In fact, I will skim through and look at a little bit of that kind of fashion stuff now. We're probably reaching about the end of this live. I'm sure we've been going for about an hour. We've done a lot on corporate and only a little bit on fashion. So if anyone does have any questions, drop them in and I'll try and do some quick roundup of those. So yeah, the benefit of the broncolors then is that we can use HMIs with them. They are built, all of the paras that we've got, to take the heat of an HMI. So that is incredibly important when we're doing shoots where we need the bigger modifiers and where we need a lot more power, especially if we're working, because still moving as a company, I don't know people know much about still moving, but we have photography division and we have moving image division. A lot of the time we'll work on the same shoots, not always, but a lot of the time, and it's nice when we work on shoots with the paras to be able to use the same light for both. And when we're using the HMIs, it's actually possible to do that because we output tons of level. So yeah, it's a natural choice for us to use the Broncolors. Broncolor's a fantastic brand, Swiss made, and the number of modifiers that you can get for them is astounding. You know, it's all kinds of little things, lovely stuff that I never really had much of a part in using, and now we've got the LED lights, we can use all the little snoots and reflectors and grids that they've got for all of those things that the photography department are using. So it's good for unifying our workflows, and we've definitely enjoyed using them. But you know, we're not saying that everyone has to go out and buy exactly what we've got. Realistic about this, so whatever lighting you have access to, you can work with. I started off, wind back a little bit and do a sort of zero to hero story here. I started off working on mini DV cameras like in the early 2000s, and that was just for filming myself doing guitar stuff, and then I moved on to like a little Sanyo Zacti HD camera, shot in 1080p, fantastic, onto SD cards, so streamline my workflow, very fast lens, f1.8, which was great. And it took me years of building up. So I go from that, tried depth of field adapters, moved on to a Canon 550D, and gradually as I'm going through, I'm building my experience, building equipment, and learning how all that equipment gets used. But lighting was one of the later things I added. So I was working on framing, I was working on camera movement, I was working on all of those other aspects, editing, color grading, before I actually got to lighting. Lighting always seemed like a really big thing to get into. It was expensive, it was difficult, I didn't know how it worked, and it was gradual progression. The first light I really got was a ring light, can't remember the make, but it's an LED ring light, and that was cool. It did its job. It's pretty small. Used it for quite a while, trying to get all kinds of different looks out of it, shot all kinds of stuff on it. I made some kind of DIY ghetto Kinoflows out of some T8 tubes, LED ones, stripped them out, ran it to a battery, kind of cabled it all up with XLRs and stuff and big speaker cable. And that was really cool. For a while it worked really well. The color rendition was not anything like this, not accurate at all, but it worked. So yeah, use what you've got, learn it, and at the end of the day, bounce, neg, that is what we come back to time and again. And if you can learn the basics with bounce and neg and natural light, then you can apply it to the artificial lighting strokes. And sometimes it's easier to modify what's there to learn it than it is to completely create it from scratch. As soon as you take everything out of a room, you've got to do everything. And that can be a little bit daunting, certainly when you're starting out. Let's have a look through some of these other questions. So, using lights like HMIs and tungsten give the same effect. Yeah, and how do you light an actor for a scene where they are going to be moving around the room? Oh my god, yes. Okay. This is something which I am talking about a lot in some of the breakdowns that I'm doing. So if you follow the channel, I break down cinematography of various different shows and films. I'm doing something on The Gentleman, and at the moment I'm also doing Sex Education. So in Sex Education, they actually move through, last episode I did, they moved through the space for the night interior a lot. Now it's very hard to cheat that kind of lighting. And it's kind of how you know, I'm going to be a little bit crass here, it's how you know your balls have dropped as a cinematographer when you're able to approach a wide shot and know that you can do it. And what I mean by that is, if you are doing any of the stuff like we saw just here, where we're doing like close shots, even that, any of those things like that, you can do that with so little equipment and get the result quite easily without really having to worry too much. Once you know what you're looking for, obviously it takes a bit of time to understand all the framing and all the rest of that, but it's relatively easy to do. And a lot of the time, certainly when I was cutting shows a few years ago, I found that I was always going with close shots. It was always close shots. Close shots were the ones that worked because those are the ones that I could affect with the lighting instruments that I had. And as you get bigger with your setups, as you try and cover more space, as you have to have people move around, that's the specific question here, you need to do a lot more. You need to really know why things work the way they work. When you're doing close shots, it doesn't matter so much, and you could go your whole career if this was what you were doing without having to understand the bigger stuff, because you don't need to. The tricky stuff is fall off, controlling the light, keeping it moody and getting a vibe, but not completely just bleaching out to everything being lit. So knowing how you achieve those different looks, different lighting states for different environments takes a long time. So when we did I'm going to have to jump in and see if I've got it in here. We did a TV ad for a client of ours, and it was Christmas themed, and we had to have a lot of different scenes that were quite wide in it, and that was challenging because, like you say, we had people moving through. Let's see if I can find it. So I know that I bought it in Christmas TV ad, not in that one. Did I bring it in? You know, I may not have done. Let's have a quick search. Christmas. Hey, tune into the Still Moving live stream and watch Dale's search for Christmas. Where's the timeline? I've got another one as well, actually. Ooh, I might not be able to find it. I have a full breakdown on this channel, for the sake of being concise here. Suffice it to say, lighting a big scene is difficult, and you need big fixtures or lots of smaller fixtures. The biggest problem you have is that, say I'm just here, and I'm in this room, and I have to walk into this room, and we've got a wide shot, which is shot from outside the window, and you need to see me walk in, sit down, talk about something, and then walk out, and it needs to be the same light on my face. Well, the light that I've got just here works when I'm sat at this point in the room, but it won't work when I'm at the door. So you can cheat it a number of different ways. You can say, and I know your specific question was, how do you keep it consistent? But supposing that you're working the scene, maybe I move into light. Maybe there's a practical just here. So when I come in, it feels natural that as I get closer to the practical, the light level on me goes up. So cheating it and creating zones of light so actors can move into that zone is one way of approaching it. Another way of approaching it would be using much bigger sources, softer sources, trying to get them further away, and then the fall off is going to be less intense, and you're lighting the space more than you're lighting just the subject. So that's the big move, that you're moving from lighting a very small zone to lighting an entire space for that actor to move through. Once you get to that point, you've got to control it, and you've got to still get your look that you want. So supposing you do want it a little bit moody, well, you've got to use flagging, you've got to use grids. Grids are a great way of approaching controlling the light. So I know someone asked a question earlier, how you keep light from flying around and getting onto the backgrounds. Well, a grid is a really cheap way of controlling your light. And I say cheap, grids aren't necessarily cheap, they could be very expensive to buy, but when you compare it to the amount of crew you need and the amount of stands and grip and flags you need to do a similar, and you can't do the same, but a similar job, it's actually more efficient and more cost effective to use a grid a lot of the time. So in that scenario, you grid your light, it stops it from flying around, it's still soft, which is a benefit. And there's some weird things happen, and this is probably beyond the scope of this live stream. I've been talking for maybe an hour and 15 minutes, maybe an hour and a half, can't see a clock. So I might not do the best job of explaining this, but suppose we had a wall of light. Imagine Arrival, where they have that big screen where the aliens are, where they go and meet them. If you had that screen, but you had a grid on it, you might immediately say, okay, we got this, and it's a big source, and it's soft, and it's flattering. If my talent walks up to it, that light source is going to get increasingly brighter as the talent approaches it. And you're right, that's how inverse square works. However, with a grid on that, actually it doesn't work in quite the same way, or albeit it does work in the same way, but there's something else affecting it as well. So as you get closer to that gridded source, you're actually, as the talent, and you can try this at home, have a grid there, move your face close to the grid, and then look, and you will be able to see fewer parts of the light through the grid. The grid will be visible, the light will be visible through the grid in front of you, but over to the edges here, it'll be completely occluded from your field of view by the grid. And that means that that light isn't going to be hitting you. So conversely, you're getting closer to it and the level's going up, but the amount of light that's able to hit you from that source is actually decreasing at a certain point, depending on the size of the grid and the angle of the grid and all kinds of different factors like that. So you can use grids and big sources in a very creative way to make sure that the fall off isn't incredibly intense. Now this is all assuming that I want to have that scene play out and the camera's static and we're not following them or anything like that. As soon as you're following, you're actually doing a slightly different thing. So just going to make sure you haven't chimed in on this, because that is quite a lot of information. People talking about the lights, broncolors. You know, I don't know what the price is on the broncolor at the moment, and the battery option is a bespoke option. So very, very small, power the light really well, but they aren't standard 14.4 volt. So, and they have their proprietary connector. I say proprietary, it's like a 4-pin XLR, but yeah, so it's a different light battery from your V-mounts to power that light. And good. Okay, so if you are doing something where you need talent to be moving through a space, then you move the light too. There are a number of ways of doing it. Tried and tested way, if you're outside, is just like a bounce. So circular bounce, square bounce, whatever kind of bounce you have, just walking along with the talent, bouncing the light into them, done, easy. So if you're doing a walk around, that is the tried and true way of doing it, assuming that you have light to begin with and that's the look you're going for. If you are doing something more complex and you're in a location, think of like the Grand Budapest Hotel. If you look up behind the scenes for the Grand Budapest Hotel, you will see this in action. But basically you can take something like a gem ball or like a paper lantern. If you're on a budget, just getting a paper lantern, if you burn your house down, it's not my fault. If you get a paper lantern and put a load of LED ribbon in it and just put that on the end of a stick, you know, or whatever you've got, and then power that and then have that in front of your actors wherever you want your light to be, that's a relatively soft, relatively innocuous source. Because it's lighting 360 degrees, it falls off nicely. It doesn't feel like you're boosting light onto them, so if it moves it doesn't feel as obvious, whereas if you had like a gridded source onto them and you're moving, you've got to be a bit more careful, because if it swings around it's going to feel like the light is moving more. So in that particular example they've got like a gem ball, which is just a slightly more filmmakery version of a paper lantern, which is nice and controllable and high temperature fabric, so that you can put a tungsten or an HMI or whatever kind of fixture of choice you want into it. And we've used gem balls a couple of times on shoots. So having that on a pole, walking along with your talent, wherever you want that light to be, you just put it there, and that is a really good way of approaching it. So I think that on the Christmas ad breakdown in the market scene, we were using the gem ball behind the talent, and that was just being boomed to move along with them. So as it booms across, they are moving, and you're getting this nice edge on them, but it's also lighting the whole of the rest of the market. It's like I think it was a 1K tungsten gem ball, and it did a good job of just giving us a general base level for our nighttime look. Really tricky at night getting the right levels, but you do need to have light to make it work, otherwise you don't see what's there, and it's a lot more light than you might imagine to make things look dark. Sounds bizarre, but it's true. So tungsten gem ball, and then I actually had someone with a couple of Astera tubes walking along by the side of the talent, just giving them their edge and filling in their faces a bit. And that's a really effective way of doing it. Just a couple of Astera tubes, Hollywood them, walk along, done. Get a gem ball, walk along, done. Like we were talking about with the broncolor light, and Rithika and Naki running along with the ballerina. Yeah, just have that in a beauty dish, have it battery powered, move along, and you're done. That's pretty much all we need to do. So there are any number of different ways of approaching how you light something, you can be going big, trying to fill a space and grid it down and control it. You can be going really small and controlled and then following your talent. But all the time you've got to keep your ratios in mind and know how things are going to change as you move through different parts of your scene. And I think that's one of the hardest things, balancing out like practicals with the source that's keying them with the general ambient. Because when we approach lighting a space, a lot of the time there's actually a light that's just there to give a certain, and it won't necessarily even be like middle grey level. Say we're lighting to have our subject key light at f5.6 on the face. Suppose this is f5.6 on me right now. Well, the light that's there for the room, for the general ambient, might be way down. You know, that might be like metering at f9, f11, lower. But it's doing something. It's just giving you enough, and you need to dial that into taste depending on what everything is sitting in your scene and if there are any practicals and how you're going to be moving. F-stops and lighting, I'm just thinking about this, might be a little bit complex, but suffice it to say, it's not doing as much as this is doing on my face, but it is doing something so that you can see the background, which is important. Just going to have a quick look at this. People are talking, trying to become a director and learn lighting. So that's Marco. Marco, are you trying to become a director or a director of photography? Because this is an interesting one for me, because I'm doing a little bit of both at the moment. So director of photography is how I've gradually progressed and come up, and that's sort of what I do. But through all that time, I've had to direct people on my shoots, and now I am directing shoots. I am talking to the talent, getting in front of the camera and showing them what I want to do. And when we're working with models, it's a similar thing. You're directing them, telling them how to move, kind of, but what spirit you're going for in the shoot. So when we're working with a ballerina, I don't say, oh, you know, you need to be doing this and this and this. I'll say we need sort of everything to feel effortless and light and floaty. And then the ballerina will know through their experience as a dancer how their body moves and how they're going to achieve that. I might do something like this in front of the camera and just sort of give an idea of the pace of the movement that I want. But yeah, it's all of that process. So got a few people asking questions, but I think we've covered them all. Okay, I'm going to pretty much wrap this up, I think. We've got tons that I've talked about just there, and there's all kinds of different examples over on the YouTube channel. I'm on the YouTube channel, but over on the page you will be able to see all of the different lighting breakdowns. Top lighting is fun. Generally you've got to go soft unless you're going for something very dramatic. And if you are going for something very dramatic, think the front cover of, oh God, which album is it? Queen album, Bohemian Rhapsody or something, where you've got the four heads looking up like this with a really hard light on them. You can do it and it works, but you've got to really know where you're putting that light and what it's doing to the structure of someone's face. Another thing to talk about with faces, actually, I said we were going to end, but we're going to do one more thing. If Nathan's still in the room, I apologise, Nathan. We got Nathan just here. Nathan, everybody. Nathan mistakenly agreed once to let us do a lighting test on him, and this is the result. This is like a 60x60 softbox, and we spun it around his head like this, so it's going all the way around, and we see a lot of different things happening as it moves around. So here is pretty much frontal, and you can see that light in the center of his eyes. It's kind of a square catch light slightly up above his head, getting a little bit of shadow under his chin, but that's pretty much flat. As the light moves around him, the character of his face changes, and you start to see imperfections in the skin. You start to catch different features. You start to give him more of a jawline or less of a jawline, depending on where it's going to be. So if we move it this way, we see that he actually has a bit of a scar on his forehead just there. And as we move the light, that scar becomes a little bit more obvious because you're creating shadows, you're creating highlights. And then conversely, move the other way, you get it, but happening the other way with the shadows and the highlights going in the different direction. And it's always a little bit more sinister when someone's kind of in the half light, in the side light, like that. Feels like he's in the shadows, skulking. Go over to this way, and we get that more traditional Rembrandt lighting, but with absolutely no fill. So that's quite nice. We get a little bit of a catch light in his eyes. We see that on his cheek as well. relatively nice, no shadow and all the rest of it. And then you go all the way round to the back, and you've got a complete silhouette with the edge all around him on his shoulders, on his hair. This sort of 3/4 backlight coming through. And again, when the angle of the light is coming across like this, you see everything on the skin. So when you're lighting people, if you're ever in doubt and you've got someone in front of you and you just need it to look beautiful, you just need them to look clean and fresh-faced and bright in the eye, put it above the camera, make it soft, make it big, above the camera and flat onto them. It isn't the most interesting form of lighting, but if you're doing corporate and you just need someone to look good, that will do the job. The downside, if they're not direct to camera, is that as soon as you turn side to camera like this, and you're presenting off to someone, I'm going extreme here, but just imagine it, all of this area just here is in shadow at the moment, because that light is over that way. But if it was flat onto me, onto the side of my face like this, then all of this would be very obvious, and that can make the side of someone's face look really big. And supposing you have someone who isn't chiseled and young like Nathan, or doesn't have a beard covering up anything untoward on my jawline like me, then you're going to suddenly notice sort of if they have a bigger neck, or maybe they have a double chin, maybe they're really self-conscious about it. You're going to find this more in corporates than in fashion and modelling. So in this situation, having the light flat onto them like that is going to give a huge sea of skin tone just there, and that's not necessarily what you want. So maybe having the light slightly off to the side is better because it defines their jawline a little bit. The light is always going to be contentious because you can do so much with it. You can change the vibe of someone's face with it completely. You go a little bit high, you go a little bit lower. You uplight someone, it's going to look crazy. It's going to look like a horror film or something. If you are lighting someone too extremely from top just here, it's going to create all kinds of shadows down the face. Even if it's soft, it's going to perhaps look a little bit too extreme. So the golden ratio of light is usually just a little bit up, off on an angle, off to the side of it, and that gives you pretty much what you need. Make it soft, probably help. Bring it in a little bit closer if you don't have a soft source. Bigger is better, and the closer it is to someone, the bigger it is relative to them. We haven't got too much into all of that weirdness with size of light versus softness of light versus distance, but that's a whole other topic and a whole other live perhaps. But that all helps. Doing that means that you're not going to have any individual LEDs if you're softening off, putting it behind diffusion, so that is going to be better for their face, less specular highlights, more homogenized, and you can get a really beautiful look. Same for fashion, you're just sculpting the face. It's just that a model likely has a more sculpted face to begin with, so they can take the light a lot more. I'll leave you with one nugget of wisdom, and then we're going to wrap this up. I, over the years now, have been doing lots of shoots with my crew. My crew are mostly young, in their 20s, good-looking people. I'm going to say that. You're all beautiful people. And it's a pain in the neck. It's a real pain in the neck, because you go out on a shoot and you sit one of them in, you sit Ben in, and Ben has great big wide eyes, and he looks fresh-faced, and he's enthusiastic, and he's ready to go, and he's alert. He hasn't had perhaps years of the world treading him down and working in the corporate machine. So Ben sits in front of the camera, looks good, I light for Ben, and then our guy comes in, 50-something, years of wear on his face. Perhaps he's a little bit out of shape. Perhaps he's a little bit hunched, you know, he's like this. He's not as alert and bright as Ben. Well, suddenly that light that looked great for Ben doesn't look so great for this guy, and we've got to change things. And that's really the thing, knowing what the light is doing to a face and knowing how to fix the problems. You don't want to say this to them. Fix the problems that you see in the face with the light, so that when you get to post, you're just polishing everything and the person will look good and they'll feel good about themselves when they look back at those images. You don't want to just go with the lighting that made Ben or Naki or Athika or Kofi or Nathan, whoever else look good, because that will mean it's not necessarily good for the person who has a different face shape. So look at the face, look at the environment, try to work with it. We might do another one of these lives if everyone's enjoyed it, if everyone is still tuned in. Goodness me, I've been going for an hour and a half. I only expected to do an hour. I expected to be a little bit more focused on fashion, but that's all good. So I hope everyone has enjoyed this. I'm going to maybe schedule another one of these for next week sometime. Publishing a video every single day at the moment, so putting a lot of effort into making interesting new content. If there's something in particular that you want to see, something that I've talked about here, something I didn't talk about, if there are any questions that I didn't touch. We've got one, tips about catch lights in eyes. Catch lights are tricky. I'll do a video on them, definitely. There's so many things that we could talk about with this. Just drop some messages to me. Every single day there's a video, so you can make a comment on one of those. We've got the 60-second cinematography. I'm breaking down all of the cinematography in sex education. Going to be doing The Gentleman. I'm also going to do some controversial stuff. I'm going to start doing painful series. I've been watching classic films that I love. Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction's on blast. You have your warning, Pulp Fiction. I'm going to be ripping Pulp Fiction apart. I'm going to be looking at the lighting and cinematography in films that I love and saying, hey, if I was there, I would have done it differently. I wouldn't have done it differently. It would have been the same because we'd have had the same pressures and I might not have even done as good a job. But we're going to look at those situations where perhaps the light wasn't perfect and why it wasn't perfect. And that to me is incredibly important. I do it with my shoots as well. I do it with things that we've done. I will pick it apart. I will look at it because you need to know. You need to know when you go out on a shoot what went wrong. You need to know what needs to be better so that next time you can address that thing. And by looking at even big budget films, even famous films or TV series or whatever else and saying, I can see that something didn't go quite right here. I remember went to BSC Expo a couple of years ago and Roger Deakins was speaking and he was talking about stuff that wasn't how he wanted it. It was in Blade Runner 2047 and he was saying, oh yeah, we couldn't, this scene that everyone had been raving about, and he sort of sheepishly sort of said, oh, we couldn't quite get the light right for that. I wanted it a little bit higher, but the set wasn't quite high enough, so we couldn't get this. And you just think, my God, at that level, there's still things that he's looking at and going, oh, could have been better. That is the point we're going to go out on. We're going to do more of these. I hope you've enjoyed it. That is all for now. I'm going to leave you with Nathan's beautiful face while I kill the live stream.